It's late January here in Florida, and I'm out here on the site of a former orange grove in southwest Florida. And I want to talk to you about something called invasive species. Now, I don't really believe in invasive species. I believe there's invasive people who plant species, but I don't believe that plants themselves can be invasive. Exotic, yes. Take over, yes. But invade? They're just trying to live. Now, this is a tree called Brazilian pepper. And my story of Brazilian pepper is that I grew up in South Florida and was in Boy Scouts. My dad also grew up in South Florida and was in Boy Scouts. And part of Boy Scouts, you do a lot of service learning projects. So you go out and you do things like picking up trash and invasive species removal. So, as a kid, my service project was to go out and remove the Brazilian pepper. As a kid, my dad's service project was to go out and plant the Brazilian pepper. You see, at the time, when my dad was in Boy Scouts, they thought it was really pretty and made a nice hedgerow, so they would plant it all over the place. Little did they know that birds love these seeds, and the seeds will fall and just spread all over the place. A lot of people are very allergic to these too. They have a chemical called urethol, which is in poison ivy. So if you don't know, don't touch the plant like I did. It can cause people's throats to close up if they eat one of these berries. I've heard stories of it being used as medicine, but that's not for me to discuss today. The point is, we got to work together to, one, control and manage invasive species. To manage invasive species. Can't really control them. See, here's another invasive species, or exotic plant. It's called rosary pea. Has a few different names, but I know it as rosary pea. And it has these beautiful red beads that were actually used for making beads like rosary. The problem with them is one bead can kill you. One pea crunched up can kill a grown man or woman. So we gotta be careful with these. But the cool thing about them is that I've heard stories of the leaves, again, not a doctor, but I've heard stories of the leaves being used in India as a fever remedy. So with so many people getting fevers these days, it's just one of those things we got to be aware of, that the only way, and this isn't my idea alone, but the only way we're really going to manage invasive species is if we, one, stop thinking them as invasive and start thinking them as our plant allies, and two, we start harvesting them for their medicinal uses and edible purposes. I like to say, when it comes to weeds, there is no such thing as a weed. There is what Alexander Ojeda, a permaculturist, called a wild edible ecological design system, or what Wendell Berry calls a plant whose virtue has yet to be realized. Oh, I love that one. It's not necessarily what Bayer, Monsanto, Syngenta, all those would have you thinking is corn in a soybean field or soybean in a cornfield. That's not really a weed. Or what the universities say is a plant that's are devoid of nutritional value and just mine the minerals. Yeah, sure, plants are doing that, but that's what a plant does. You can learn a lot from your so-called weeds. Out here in Florida, we don't have dandelions. Why? Well, it has to do with the temperature and soil condition. So we can learn a lot from dandelions, such as what they're seeking, those minerals that they thrive in. So instead of thinking what your plant does not have, think about what it does have, what your soil does have. based on what the weeds are. We got to learn from plants. We got to stop looking at them as invasive and start looking at them as teachers. So here I am at a grove we're going to be taking management of. There's about 15 acres of Moringa. I'll walk over to it. Some papaya, lots and lots of quote unquote weeds, which don't exist, but lots of high grass. Gotta be careful you don't step in a hole or find a snake out here in the high grass. But yeah, we're gonna be managing this land through Gopal Farm and its subsidiary companies, and we're going to be planting organic vegetables out here. Now, the organic certification takes some time to get, so it might not be instantly that we can say these are certified organic, but we're going to be growing them without harmful chemicals. And going back to that idea of all plants have a purpose, what do we do with diseased plants, such as the oranges? What do we do now that there's all these orange groves that we can't really harvest and sell the oranges for in South Central Florida? Well, I'll tell you my idea. My idea is, instead of wasting these oranges that suffer from citrus greening, HN1 disease, Houlong disease, I can never say that word, Houlong disease, which is caused by the Asian citrus psyllid and a bacteria that infects the trees. Well, instead of throwing those trees away, burning them, slashing them, mulching them, which might have to happen eventually, we utilize them as a crop, but not for eating directly. You see, what happens with citrus greening is it turns the fruit on the tree green and bitter. It also starts to defoliate the tree, and disease persists on the tree leaves, and the tree leaves will fall off. So what can be done with the fruit itself if not for eating? Well, I'll tell you. Compost. We make compost on a massive scale, right? We harvest the fruit, and instead of selling them for anyone to eat, we sell them, or we rather process it into compost. And in this way of taking those nutrients and repurposing them, whether we apply it directly on the field and cover it with a tarp, which is one way of making compost, or the more traditional way of processing compost, where you put in big piles and then you let nature and time compress the piles. So those are the two ways of making compost that I can perceive with these oranges. Anyway, we're going to make this compost and apply it to vegetables and fruit trees, and just to the soil. Even where we're not planting our edible trees, we apply it to the soil, and we start returning some of those nutrients that have been mined for years and years and years and went off to be turned into oranges to be sold at stores. So people like myself, I'm guilty of eating a good old orange. Florida navel orange was my favorite as a kid. Peel it. Oh, the seedless ones. I actually didn't really like those as much as I like the seeded ones. And, you know, the whole point of a fruit is to produce seeds, right? From a botanic point of view, their whole point is to have seeds. So you're kind of robbing the fruit tree of its purpose if you don't have a seeded fruit. Anyway, I'm here at the Moringa. Visit the rows and rows of Miringa trees. Now, Moringa is a superfood. You can eat it straight off the tree. You can wash it, cook it, process it. You can do all kinds of things with it, make it into powder for smoothies and drinks. But Moringa is, if there is such a thing as a superfood, Moringa is definitely one of them. And these are old Moringa trees. You can see how thick the trunks are by how short they are. That's because when the owners harvest, what they do is they come in and cut the branches and keep the trees short and harvest the Moringa from it. So you can see in here you have a bunch of different cut branches. Yeah. So these also produce a product called drumsticks in India. Whoa, that was cool. So these produce a product called drumsticks in India, where they harvest the fruit for like the pod, the seed pod itself, and can process it. Moringa is also used for cleaning up water. So what if we took these seeds, which I don't see any on these trees right now, but what if we took these seeds, which are used for water filtration, crush them up, mix them with biochar or charcoal, and we turn them into a water filtration system? Wouldn't that be interesting? Imagine that, growing our water filtration. So back to the oranges, we can actually use the trees themselves to make biochar. And we can burn the wood of the trees to make this activated charcoal, biochar, and process it into a soil amendment. It's not really a fertilizer, because the way it works is what you're doing with the biochar is you're creating habitat for microbes such as bacteria and fungus to thrive, which is actually a good thing. Turns out we want bacteria and microbes and all these things to live, because that's what soil is. You know, I've heard the quote many times, the reason we have so much problems in the world is because we treat our soil like dirt. I really resonate with that, but I want to expand on that and say the reason we have so many problems in this society is because we treat our farmers like peasants, right? Farmers aren't meant to be peasants. We're meant to be scientists, to be healers, to be caretakers, stewards. That's what it means to be a farmer, not to be a peasant. We're the shepherd, we're not the sheep. So, with that being said, the Florida Everglades is massive. Just huge. And it's shrinking. It's shrinking rapidly. And I wrote a poem yesterday and published it on Medium called Home in the Dome, about a cypress dome. Now, there's no way for me to really know, well, maybe there is, but I don't know exactly what this land was historically. If it was pine flats, cypress, scrub pine, but I know it was some kind of Florida native vegetation historically. And it was home to probably people, but also many different creatures. Now, the thing is, we got to start thinking big again. And I say again because we used to have these big ideas as societies where we would look at Everglades restoration today and say that's too hard. It's too much work to restore the Everglades. But 100 years ago, people looked at Everglades destruction. What did they call it back then? planned development, right? So they looked at this planned development for the Everglades and said, we can do this. We can build these series of locks and dams and canals, and we can drain the Everglades, right? Literally drain the swamp. That's what people referred to as draining the swamp, was actually draining wetlands. Yeah. So we have, as a society, as humanity, successfully destroyed in just a few lifetimes those kidneys of the earth, wetlands. More than 50% of wetlands are gone, way more than 50%. In some states, it's like 80, 90%. But we have a chance to restore these wetlands and to eat well, to eat better. Those thousands of acres of oranges, what did that, I mean, sure, vitamin C, it's good for you, right? Vitamin C is very healthy for people to eat. But gram for gram, things like longleaf pine needles, white pine needles have more vitamin C than oranges. And those are up north. So we're sending all these oranges from Florida up north so that people can get vitamin C and sure have a sugary, delicious snack. Not knocking oranges. I'm just saying, let's be smarter about how we utilize our land, about how we view land in general. So the problems stem from treating the soil like dirt, the farmers like peasants, and food like commodities. Okay? Food is not a commodity. Food is your life. It's as simple as that. Food is what you are. You are what you eat, literally. Water is life. Food is us. So this is Florida's state tree, the sable palm. Judging by the height, it's only a couple years old. Maybe 4 or 5 years old, maybe less. But this is Florida's state tree. And I love its Florida state tree because it just pops up on its own accord, where much else can't thrive. You can see it's right next to what looks like a Brazilian pepper, but the Florida state tree is still popping up on its own. And the funny thing about it is it's not really a tree. It's actually a palm, which are what's called monocot as opposed to dicot, which trees are, meaning it's basically an overgrown grass or a large grass. Same as bamboo, same as bananas, same as coconuts. So, anyway, behind me, we have more rows and rows and rows of moringa. So I'm going to walk down these rows of moringa and just take a look. Some are flowering. You can see the butterflies up there. A lot are flowering. And you can see wow, it is beautiful. You can see the soil here. When I dig in, sandy on top. Rich on the bottom. kind of reminds you of some Floridians, rough on top, but when you get down to it in the set core, they are not fertile but very, very rich people. I don't mean financially either. Some of them though. Anyway. That's the story of Florida, though, is from a geographic standpoint. Florida's made of sand and limestone. And the heart of Florida is the sandy soil on top of this beautiful limestone aquifers with cave systems underneath it. But those aquifers have been drained so much. And because of that, wells have to go a little deeper sometimes. Our water table is not, still in some places is super shallow, but springs have dried up. All over the state, springs have dried up. And most people and most Floridians don't really think of South Florida as having springs, but it used to. Like over 100 years ago, there were springs in South Florida. I saw some of the last springs, which are just a pipe now in the ground on the Miccosukee Reservation in Big Cypress. There's probably more out there that are unknown by scientists and probably heavily guarded by the native people and the local land stewards. But you don't find springs that much anymore in Florida. So, anyway, to recap, I'm here on a farm. Let's do it. Let's buy land. Let's make the land healthy, happy, productive. Let's make ourselves healthy, happy, productive. Let's be sunny. Let's do it. Let's get together. Make land into a productive ecosystem. Once again, for the sake of the birds, for the sake of the bees, for the sake of the panther, for the sake of humanity, let's figure out a way that we can start harnessing food to be our medicine. Once again, let's stop treating the soil like dirt, the farmers like peasants, and food like commodity. Rather, let's treat the soil like gold, the food like medicine, and the farmers like people we respect, people we admire. I gotta work on that one. As a humble farmer, it's hard for me to decide what I want to be treated like. Certainly not an athlete or superstar, but hey, some farmers are looked at that way now. So more power to you. But anyway, yeah, well, I'm gonna go take the soil samples that I came out here for now, and stay tuned. Learn more about what we're doing on Pine Island with coconut and mango farms. Check out my film about Florida and activism at For Your Grandchildren Film, free on YouTube to watch. Read my poems, Medium, at Mike Tintner. And, be happy. Be healthy. Grow some food. Restore some land. Save the world. Help humanity. Take care.